Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Designated Pundits. I'm Bob here with Scott and our guest, Wes, here as we preview Nashville SC's 2025 Major League Soccer season. This season, as always, previews for each and every Major League Soccer team. This season, 30. We are up to 30 teams. This project gets longer and longer each and every year, but we get to meet great podcast hosts, guests, pundits from all over Major League Soccer. Today, we are joined by Wes Boling from Club and Country, a Nashville more than a podcast now. It's like a network that you guys got going on over there. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, my buddy Tim Sullivan started the website when Nashville SC joined USL back in the day, and then we moved into a podcast, part of the 440 Sports Network here in Nashville. So glad to join you. First time on with you guys, but I've been exposed to your work before and appreciate. Hey, by the way, by this time, like 10 years from now, you're gonna start when off season starts. Just get to all the clubs. We're gonna be like 60 at this pace.
No, because MLS is definitely bringing ProRel into the future, right? That's what Twitter told me. I don't know. I'm a blue sky guy now.
Twitter will tell you that. Yeah.
All right. Well, if you are joining us live or if you're catching the replay, make sure you go and subscribe. We are on YouTube at the Designated Pundits on your favorite podcast platform, or go to thedesignatedpundits.com to our kind of new revamped websites. There's tons of links to get to all of our content. If you subscribe, share with some friends, that's really going to help us bring you content like this each and every week, or in this case, 30 days straight for all the Major League Soccer teams. But Wes, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to want to start today's episode the way we've started every preview so far, which is tell us about your favorite soccer memory from 2024.
I'm going to cheat, and it's not going to be related to Major League Soccer, if that's all right.
That's fine. That's fine.
Took a trip in February of 24 to London and met my brother at the Emirates for an Arsenal match, and it just happened to be Arsenal-Liverpool back when Arsenal was still in the title race. I guess they technically were until the last day there. And beat Liverpool 3-1, watching with my brother at Emirates Stadium. First time there with him. And it was special. So, one of those moments where even if we lost 4-0, it would have been amazing. But then when the team meets the moment and you're in the pub singing Arsenal songs, it's hard to beat. So that was definitely not only just the best soccer memory of last year, but maybe ever for me.
Awesome. That sounds like such a great time. I'm always intrigued by how people come to be fans of different teams, and I saw someone on social media say, of course, Arsenal's every American's favorite soccer team because they have guns in the logo.
Not my rationale for sure, but I joined in. It was 2007, and I loved the free-flowing style and the fact that they were always in contention and sometimes won, but usually didn't, and then they haven't since. But then I guess it was a precursor, maybe an omen. The week that I became an Arsenal supporter, Thierry Henry left for Barcelona, and it's been all downhill for the most part. It's just my luck. Just my luck. I have a thing for teams that are always good and always get your hopes up and then never actually take home the trophy. That's kind of my vibe. Tennessee football, Atlanta Braves baseball. It's a problem.
I'm a Braves baseball fan myself, actually. Funny story about that.
I've had a hard time.
Let's now talk about the 2024 Major League Soccer season for Nashville SC. 9 wins, 9 draws, 16 losses, 5-6-6 at home, 4-3-10 away. Y'all scored 38 goals, 54 conceded. So you had a good defense, but that offense was inept to say the least. Minus 16 goal differential. That lands you 13th place in the East, and you missed the playoffs by 4 points. Not a great season. For me, it's kind of summed up by solid soccer for a team with that record because the defense was pretty sound. You had a good idea of how you were going to go out there and play, just could not find the back of the net. Is that how you saw 2024?
I think so. I think that Nashville SC has always been a high floor club. And unfortunately for the club last year in the first half of the season, because of injuries, that floor dipped. The team was okay defensively, but conceded in key moments. I think there were 3 or 4 matches early in the year, including in in continental play where they go up 2-0. They're up 2-0 on Messi and Suarez, and they concede a couple goals, and it's a draw. There were moments like that where the defensive solidity lowered their floor to the point that the club got rid of Gary Smith, its only manager since USL, because they couldn't trust that anymore. They knew the ceiling was never going to be stratospheric, but the floor was low enough they were always going to be in contention. And at the level of payroll that Nashville SC has, typically around middle of the league, they're never going to be the type that's just going to spin their way to 70 goals, right? They have to give up 40 or fewer to be elite. And the attack never really came on, in part because of the injuries, and in part then because of the coaching change, where you had now a possession-oriented manager in BJ Callahan coming in and replacing a guy who was happy to sit back and employ a mid-block, press and be steely. And so I think a lot of the second half of the year, you look around and you'd say, what are we doing here? What's the plan? And the problem wasn't that there was a lack of a plan. It was that the players didn't fit the plan of the new manager. And Nashville SC has replaced 14 guys in the offseason and reworked things a bit. And I think they're going to follow the plan. Whether or not they're good, we'll see. But they're going to follow that plan a lot better this year.
Yeah, I think what you said really cuts to it from what an outsider's perspective. It seemed like the worst Nashville could be was just really not that bad because that defense was so good. Mm-hmm. And like, honestly, goals conceded per match last year, you come in at like 17th at 1.6 goals conceded per game, which is really not bad. You're only like 0.2 of a goal back from basically being like 8th or something like that.
Sure.
So defense, like, still not that bad, but that like offense, when you say that offense never got going, 1.1 goals per game, that is a tough thing to overcome. That defense has to be nearly perfect, to overcome an offense that only scores 38 goals a season.
And 24 of those 38 goals were at home. If you look at their home form, 5 wins, 6 draws, 6 losses. It's not good, but it is average. They had a -1 goal differential there. The -15 came on the road, being 4-3 and 10 away. So that just kind of solidifies everything for me. That tells you a lot of information that you need to know there. I mean, team scoring less than a goal per game away, 0.82 goals per game away, 1.41 at home. So what you get from a mediocre offense that, when you get the support of the fans, you get that little 5% boost, and that, shows up on the scorecard there, Wes.
Yeah, it was hard. It was frustrating, and the XG was a little better. I think they were 6 below what they should have scored, but even that XG is 11th in the Eastern Conference. So they're underachieving, but even then they're not doing enough to get themselves in that conversation. And I think part of the problem was that Hani Mukhtar is the type of player, as most guys are up top, that rely on some help or interplay, and he was having to play further back into midfield to try to kickstart the attack. And then where is he going to go from there, right? Teams have wisened up to the impact he can have on matches. My co-host Tim Sullivan was joking that his MO for 2 years, Hani's, was to get the ball in midfield and look around, and nobody would mark him that far out. So he'd just go 30 yards and give himself a chance, or a quick 1-2, and he's in on goal. Teams are smarter than that now. And Nashville didn't have a second option to build and generate the attack last year. And so Hani did way too much. His numbers don't show it, because he didn't have any help. And I think that has been at least attempted to be remedied this year. We'll see if that actually happens.
So let's take a look at exactly who the goal scorers were last year. Sam Surridge, 12 goals, 2 assists. Hani Mukhtar, 8 goals, 9 assists. You had Alex Muil, 5 goals and an assist. Tila Bunbury, 3 and 2. Jacob Schaffelberg, 2 goals, 3 assists. And Annabelle Godoy with a goal and 3 assists. That shows you a lot. I mean, you got 2 goal scorers combining for 20. That's not enough from your top 2 guys. But you have Hani with 8 and 9. That is close to what you'd want. 15 and 15 maybe from him, somewhere in that range. Nothing jumps off the page here. I mean, you got some guys that you don't want on the score sheet. If Annabelle Godoy is showing up on your top 6 goal scorers, you got an issue.
Yeah, what jumps out to me, I think, is the lack of assists from guys that are not Hani Mukhtar. Hani was relied on too much again to be a creator and a collaborator without having anybody to collaborate with him. And Sam Surridge, I think you could, just press button, put him on the field. He's going to get at least 10 to 12 goals in a year because he's good at putting himself in position. He's got the big meaty English forehead, and he can, he's a smart, savvy, physical striker and good at this level. But I think the problem was, again, Hani, a secondary threat there, but the primary creator. and you need more players creating around him. Hani Mukhtar and Sam Sturridge needed to combine for 35 to 38 goals last year instead of 20. And I think this year we may not see actually a massive increase in their combined goals. I think what we're going to see is more guys, taking Alex Wheel's place on the score sheet, and Teal Bunbury's, and getting 8, 9, 10 goals themselves, and creating more and getting 8, 9, 10 assists themselves, which I think is even more important.
I think the name that really jumps out to me is Jacob Schaffelberg, closing the season with 2 goals and 3 assists. That's a player that I think we've seen succeed in other contexts. And so for me, I don't know, is this just like really naive of me to think that he is a guy that probably should have produced a bit more for this team?
No, I think it's perfectly fair. I think you have a couple factors that are mitigating factors there. Number one, he was active internationally for Canada, where he has a somewhat different role. And so he's still adjusting to dividing his time, right? I mean, he only played 23 matches for Nashville and started 16. So I think you essentially double those minutes, and you're going to get double the production. I think the other thing with Schaffelberg, he had some injury issues, and he's still working toward being that roll him out and go 75 to 80 minutes a game player. He is a Major League Baseball closer in a lot of ways, who's being asked to go 6 or 7 innings. And, he's got the fastball, and his fastball is as good as anybody in this league, which is that he's an extremely explosive player, a chalk on the boots wing, especially on the left side, but who can invert really effectively. But when you have a player who's that explosive and that speedy, you're more of an injury risk. And I think what he could do to really serve himself well is to actually take it down a little bit and throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball instead of 100, if you will, and manage that speed and pick his moments. And I think if he can do that and he can play 30-plus games for this team, then I think we're looking at an 8 to 9 goal season. We're looking at a bunch of assists. And more importantly, tactically, a guy who can take the lid off the attack and stretch the defense, even if he's not credited with any numbers at the end of the attack.
More Maddox, less John Rocker, if you will.
Oh gosh, John Rocker, yeah,
on that one.
And more popular in New York probably than John Rocker. I guess anybody would be, right?
Let's look at the outgoing players. There were over 14 players leaving. I tried to pick a few to highlight here: Forster Ajago, Tabry Nanunga, Godoy, Drew Yearwood, Lucas McNaughton, Sean Davis. Him and Yearwood, I guess, were, with Dax McCarty, that Red Bull club that all decided to play in Nashville together. Yep. Shaq Moore, one of my favorite players. I was shocked looking at his intangibles, seeing like his height and weight, because he plays like such a big guy. I remember seeing him front row because the media at Red Bull Arena put you right in front of the right back of the opposing team, and I was just like, wow, this guy is, what a physical player. Randall Leal, a player who just couldn't stay healthy, had a lot of possibilities, and he looks to be a starter on another Major League Soccer team. And Wubens Pacius, just being one of my favorite names in Major League Soccer. Any players here that really hurt, or is this just kind of a changing of the guard?
Midfield's gone. Midfield's totally switched out. I mean, especially if you incorporate Dax McCarty's departure from a year ago. He's a cornerstone player for this club. And you look at Anuga, Godoy, Yearwood, and Davis. Those were your 4 midfielders last year, and they're out of here. Yearwood was a 1-year experiment. It was on a 1-year deal that didn't really click, and part of that was injury. Part of that was now the style with BJ Callahan. Godoy, of course, a veteran who, in my view, deserves to be on the Ring of Honor in Nashville when it's all said and done. An unsung hero, but it was probably time there. Sean Davis, Nashville found its number, trading him for Gaston Brugman and getting a player who can pull more strings in the attack versus being kind of a side-to-side passer and a defensive guy. And the Randall Leal could never stay healthy for this team. And I think, last year, Mike Jacobs told us this is a big year for Randall. He needs to perform and stay healthy. And he just couldn't do it. I think he's beloved here in Nashville as well for what he could be. But the difference in midfield, the change in midfield, is the biggest area where Nashville is evolving to fit the needs of BJ Callahan, a manager who's much more possession-oriented, whereas Gary Smith, one of the steely defensive central mids. Nashville maybe has 1 or 2 of those on the roster now, and they've got attackers. They've got a bunch of 8s on the roster to replace them.
So let's look at some of those players who were added. You had defenders like Josh Bauer, Palacios, Chris Applewhite, Andy Najjar filling some spots, definitely a necessity there. In midfield, Edvard Tagseth, who I kind of have as like a left midfielder, left winger in the starting roster. We'll pull that up in just a minute. Gaston Brugman, was he MVP of MLS Cup? Won with LAFC last year, made himself very valuable, so much so that he needed a new location that could, pay his new salary. And Brian Acosta, rounding out the midfield here. Also brought in backup goalkeeper Edgar Valdez and Brian Schwake.
Schwaki. I messed that one up on our podcast too. Rhymes with hockey. Schwaki.
If you gave me a million tries, I wouldn't have had that.
Well, we tried to catch it. We watched a bunch of Scottish highlight reels, and all it was the keeper with a huge save. It was bad Scottish, but we never got the last name, so it wasn't helpful at all. And I would actually put Tagseth probably on the right side at midfield, but he's versatile. Same with Schaffelberg. They can switch, and I think what BJ Allen has shown us is that you will name a formation, I guess, but it doesn't matter. Like with a lot of managers, that positional versatility in total football. And Tagseth actually exemplifies that better than anybody else. We mentioned with Schaffelberg earlier, taking the lid off the attack. Tagseth does that on the other end. What Nashville wants to do is possess in midfield with a bunch of fluid passers, including Nahar on the right flank, including Acosta, who I think will back up either Brugman or Yazbek in midfield. And then pop it over the top when you get a moment and have one of Mukhtar, Tagseth, Schaffelberg, Wheel, Tyler Boyd when he's healthy, Jonathan Perez, any of those guys, and Yazbek floating around. And I think that this team's going to be pretty solid in the attack once they figure out the rhythm and the flow. But whereas Gary Smith was a little bit more paint by numbers in his attack, I think that BJ Callahan wants to let guys go and have a more total football or even a Pep Guardiola type of approach. If the results resemble Pep Guardiola, I'll be surprised this year, but that would be amazing.
So we had to make a depth chart because that's what we do for graphics on the show. I put a 4-2-2-2, kind of a narrow formation on here. Let's just take it from the back. Joe Willis, solid Major League Soccer quality goalkeeper.
Yeah, Nashville keeps on bringing in guys to challenge his role. And other than Elliot Panico's run in the Leagues Cup in 23, nobody's been able to successfully do it. I think this is probably Willis's job for at least one more season. But I think Schwaki coming in at age 23, he's already played more than 100 professional appearances. And I think he has not just the experience and savvy, but also the physical skill to challenge Willis for that role at some point. Or at the very least, to be the guy that you're more than happy to put in on a short week or U.S. Open Cup.
Moving up one to the center backs, I have Jack Marr and Walker Zimmerman as my projected starters. But you have the new guy, Yaison Palacios. I'm sure that's a butchering. And you got Josh Bauer back there. You also have the kid Chris Applewhite in the mix there. Let's talk about your best two pairing and then how the depth chart is going to break down.
It's Mayer and Walker for sure. And I think what Nashville's done well here is they've got a guy in Bauer who is versatile, who could back up Mayer and fill in, who could also be a right back and has played some right back for this team as well. Palacios, we'll see. He is the friendly last Saturday was his first time ever walking in Geodis Park. So he's new. He'll take some time to work in. And Applewhite's a guy, he's a homegrown player, their third homegrown signing, and the guy I think they probably feel is most ready of the three to step in if he had to. Very young, but very good tools. I don't know that he's going to see a lot of time this year, but if Nashville was decimated by injury or, Walker's out on international duty and they need to throw him in there, I think they would not be terrified to throw him in.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to the wing backs or the left and right back here. Dan Lovitz on the left, Andy Nahar on the right. Is that mostly how you see that? And I guess tell us a little bit too about what their role is in this back four, especially with the coaching change.
Sure, in a pretty narrow attacking shape. I think Lovitz and Nahar are going to be relied on to get back and forth up the field very quickly. And I think Nahar has proven that in his time in DC. They ran a three center back look in DC, and as the right center back, he was kind of doing the Sheffield thing and inverting a lot, doing the overlap, and I think that worked out really well for them. I think in the 60 minutes I saw him play for Nashville last week in their friendly, he did a lot of that same work to create overloads along that right side. It was really effective in doing so. Lovitz has done that traditionally in his career pretty well in the attack too. I'm older than him, so I can say it. He's getting up in years just a little bit. I am very much up in years, but I'm not asked to run 60 to 90 minutes a game. And I hope that his legs can hold up for what's going to be demanded of him. If not, Taylor Washington is one of the more underrated players in this league in terms of a guy who can do a shift extremely fast, very fit, and actually a really good fit. He's not going to be an instrumental attacker, but he's a guy who's not going to lose his man going back the other way if he needs to. And I think Julian Gaines, another guy on the right side who has a high work rate. He's young. I don't think he'll beat out Nahar for that role. But again, I think you can rotate him in and trust his legs to give you 90. You're not going to have to sub him out. And he's going to put in a lot of work to team up with a very savvy defender in Zimmerman on that right side.
It's a nice thing to be able to have, depth you can trust when you do need to rotate.
Mm-hmm.
The Wheel's on there somewhere too with his work rate. I know we're going to talk about him a little bit in the more forward position here.
Yeah. You can take the kid out of Red Bull, but you can't take the Red Bull out of the kid.
Exactly.
Well, let's go into this kind of new look midfield then. I suspect you'll have a lot to say about that. We're looking right now at maybe Gaston Brugman and Patrick Yazbek as the starters with Brian Acosta as your kind of first rotation. Is that how you see that playing out?
I think so. I think that Brugman and Acosta may share some time. Brugman's coming back from injury, so I didn't get to see him Saturday in the friendly. But they really like what he adds as really the only member of that midfield who's going to sit back and pull the strings and be that Arturo Vidal type of player. Just sitting and pinging in a 6 role, bringing some steeliness in defense. And Brian Acosta has that skill as well. He has the vision of a number 10, but the toughness of a 6 when he needs to. And then everybody else is an 8. I mean, anybody else on this roster in midfield is pretty much, Yazbek, Alex Muil has that skill set as well. Jonathan Perez, Tagseth feels that way too. And so I think my biggest question mark is here. Number one, you're replacing your whole midfield. How long does it take to get that chemistry? But number two, do you have that player who's going to go studs up when he needs to and really step into a tackle and recover quickly on defense? It wouldn't surprise me if we saw Nashville give up more than 54 goals, which was their mark last year. They're going to score a lot more than 38 because they're going to be more assertive in the attack. And what I like about this midfield is, again, this total football approach, teaming up especially with the fullbacks to create overloads and get Sam Surridge and Hani Mukhtar in space on the other side. And I think the personnel sets up really well to do that with Yazbek, with Brugman, and then also with a guy like Tagseth, playing pretty narrowly, Wheel pretty narrowly, Boyd when he's healthy as well, still working his way back. And then guess what? You got Schaffelberg, who's going to have white feet because he's running along the chalk on the flank and gives you just a little bit more width to help out as well on the other side.
It's going to be so interesting with this group. We're already kind of working our way forward. We've talked a little bit about Tagseth and Schaffelberg and the kind of opportunities there. And it looks like there's depth in Alex Muil and Tyler Boyd. Let's jump to the forwards now. Sam Surridge, Hani Mukhtar, probably the 2 starters. Sam Sturridge especially looked like a really good addition to the team. Talk a little bit about their dynamic and what you sort of expect out of them for this season.
Yeah, I think that Surridge, he's brought in under Gary Smith in 2023 to be a bit of a target forward and also a guy who could possess in midfield, win those 50-50s, take the ball down and be strong on the counter. And he helped, Nottingham Forest get to the Premier League the year before by doing just that. They were a counter-attacking team. And I think Mike Jacobs, the GM, saw that and said, that's the template. That's us. Guess what? It's not Nashville anymore. Now it's a possession-oriented team. And so now Surridge's job is to camp out in that final third and be part of the action inside the 18 or right around it. And I think, again, he's going to have more support from his crew of number 8s, his boy band of number 8s behind him, and from Hani Mukhtar, who, again, is going to be able to be pushed further up the pitch, too. And so those two have had good chemistry since pretty much day one. I mean, they teamed up to beat a couple of Mexican super teams in Leagues Cup in 2023. Numbers were down last year because, again, they didn't have the support in midfield. Now that they have that, I really like his ability. He had a hat trick again in the friendly I watched. It was a USL opponent, Lexington. Don't expect him to have a hat trick every time. But I think he's going to have more opportunities because of the overloads and because of the creation around him. And I think Hani Mukhtar can be really grateful that he's got that support behind him as well. So those guys don't have to be the targets now in at the edge of midfield. They can play off the eights. They can play back where they need to, but they'll have the support to get forward and be more incisive. And one name that's not on here, and he shouldn't be yet, but I think he might be, is Adem Sipik. He's a homegrown player. He's like 18, 19 years old from the NSC Academy. He looks the part. He's extraordinarily young, but I think Sipik has caught on as the number 3 striker. And I think the best thing he can do is follow Teal Bunbury everywhere he goes. Follow the veteran. Teal has chipped in and can put in a shift for this team. He's got older legs now, but man, his mind is so sharp. And I think that Sipik can learn from him and maybe have an impact this year too.
Before we move on, any words about the depth behind Hani Mukhtar? If he needs a rest or, kind of heaven forbid, has like an injury, what's the plan for that?
I think your plan is positional versatility there. I think that, there's not really a guy who can do exactly what he does. But I think you rework your formation and you run a 4-3-3, for instance, that puts one of the wings with Schaffelberg, Schaffelberg, Boyd, and Surridge, and your eights are helping beyond that with maybe a double 8 situation with Brugman below them. I think you just change the look, and I think Nashville has enough bodies up top now that look the incision, the incisiveness, the strength of Hani Mukhtar you can't replace, but I think you would compensate for it with 2 or 3 guys by tweaking the formation versus having any kind of like-for-like substitution. Randall Ayal, in theory, maybe was that in past years. Not an identical game, but some similar skills. And I just don't think that player's on the roster now.
Awesome. So let's take a look at some 2025 storylines to follow. I pose them as questions here on this graphic, but they're, not necessarily going to be answered here today. First is, can Hani Mukhtar return to dominance and give 20-plus goal contributions? For me, this is going to, live and die by Hani Mukhtar. And it seems like the years that you've been successful, he's been the guy. The years that he's not so successful, I define success for, a player of his caliber by saying, 20 plus goal contributions. It can be 8 and 12, 8 goals, 12 assists. It can be 12 goals, 8 assists. I don't really care which particular one it is. But what do you think the chances are that Hani can really step up and be a name in MLS again? Because last year there were times, back of the milk carton,
Yeah, I think he has to. I think it's a Goldilocks situation that you got to get just right, where Hani, yes, does need to have more than 20 goal contributions. At the same time, his percentage of the team's overall goal contributions has to lower. It has to go down. The reliance has been way too heavy on Hani. And let's face it, he's carried the load beautifully in stretches. You look at his 2023 season and oh my gosh. It was incredible. 22, 21. There are folks here in Nashville that believe that he should have beaten out Carlos Heel for MVP back in 21. I'm one of them, quite honestly. But I think that you don't want Hani Mukhtar to be the league MVP this year, honestly, because it means that he was maybe too valuable to Nashville. I say that hyperbolically, of course. If he's the MVP, sure, that's awesome. But I think, you need guys like, keep on going back to Tagzeth, and back to Schaffelberg and Surridge and Boyd when he's healthy. So yes, 20 plus goal contributions needs to happen. That will be a reflection, a symptom of a root improvement in this team's attacking fluidity. At the same time, I think Hani would even tell you, you know what, if I'm giving 5 of those contributions away to these new guys coming in or to Sam Surridge and we're winning games, let's roll with it. That's fine.
Awesome. My next one is, what do the team's financials look like? Right now I have 2 DPs, right? Surridge and Zimmerman.
And Hani as well.
Hani, okay, he's on a DP contract. So what is your availability to bring in new talent? You did make a couple signings. Any more rumors we need to be watching through the preseason?
Yeah, Nashville's a testament to the fact that you can't reshape an MLS roster in one off season. I think, they talk about Nashville SC 2.0 from a roster and performance and style standpoint. And I think that the question is, where are they along that spectrum? They're not at 2.0 yet because they don't quite have every piece they want to do what BJ Gallen wants to do. Are they 1.1? It's not going to be a great year. Are they 1.8? A couple changes away. Financials, starting the offseason, they had the 3rd lowest available GAM in Major League Soccer, behind only, I believe, it's Galaxy and Dynamo. Part of that is they've not been able to successfully sell talent abroad and then incorporate those dollars back into GAM. They've made some smart and savvy moves, I think, getting Shaq Moore off the books at actually a pretty low level sitting him to Texas, but getting that salary off the books, replacing that basically with paying Sean Davis's salary to go play for Galaxy and getting Ruben in at a low number. So they don't have infinite resources to rework, which is why you've seen a lot of guys come in on 1 to 2 year contracts like Ryan Acosta or Andy Nahar, guys that have options that can stick around next year if they're really good. But I think the club realizes they need veteran placeholders to bring the young players along and to give them time to negotiate and stockpile a little bit more GAM. And as always, they try to go heavy on domestic, and they have a great immigration lawyer that gets a lot of green cards done so that they can, sell those international slots at 200 a pop. And I think they've gotten 600,000 to 800,000 in GAM just from that. So I think their position relative to the rest of the league is better than it was when off season started. Probably not third lowest GAM of everybody. Even still, it's going to take them a couple of off seasons or 2 or 3 transfer windows to get to the personnel situation they really want to be in.
The last one I have here is, how does BJ Callahan impact the team a full year under his plan? What changes do you expect to see? We've kind of gone over, scoring a little more. Anything else?
Yeah, you're not going to see the Nashville SC you were used to seeing for the first 5 years of MLS, which is a team that, again, was going to not sit back totally, but be comfortable letting you take the initiative, and they were going to counter on you when you least expected it and score and win 1-0 or 2-0. Now you've got a team that has removed that floor for sure and is going to be more aggressive in midfield especially, and be a possession-based team. I think you're going to look at this team and you're going to see something that more closely resembles the Philadelphia imprint or the U.S. men's national team under Greg Berhalter. And I know that, could sound very derogatory to say, but I think it's a team that at its best will do what those teams have done well, which is, look, straightforward team, aggressive in possession, really fast along the flanks to make up for being so narrow. And then you win those battles in the phone booths in midfield and work the ball forward. So it's a very different look, which is why it's such a challenge to remake the roster. Nashville has, I don't think they've overcorrected, but they've strongly corrected from Gary Smith. And so it's going to take some time to see the identity. It didn't really happen a lot in the second half of last year after the change was made, but it wasn't expected to. And I think that there's a lot of optimism in Nashville that this club can really show that identity now and honestly be a lot more entertaining to watch.
I think they will be a lot more entertaining to watch. And I tend to agree with you about the floor of this team. It feels like the floor is going back up for this group. And we're going to move on to talking about kind of realistic and, optimistic outcomes for the season. But it feels like, if we are, back again, talking about this team at the end of the season, we are going to talk about how that offensive unit, especially if they stayed healthy or not, because if they stay healthy, there's one floor. And if they don't stay healthy, that's a completely different floor for this team.
I completely agree, especially when you're looking in attack at some of your biggest pieces. They'd love to have 2 or 3 more guys, I think, up there who they could rely on to come in and be goal scorers ahead of, and I love them to death, but an Alex Muyl or, somebody like that. And I think that's what they're evolving toward. But I think because of that, your ceiling is only so high, and you have to rely on the beauty of a playoff system. Where you get in and it's more generous than ever, of course. You get in as one of those 10 and you're peaking at that time and you make some noise. I think this is a team that aspires to be a 6th, 7th, 8th place team. And I think a realistic outcome is probably that they sneak into the playoffs after finding themselves. And then who knows? I mean, it's a crapshoot, as we all know, once you get there.
Atlanta showed us. I kind of agree. I think realistically, this team should have enough healthy players to have enough kind of going for the season that they should be realistically thinking of themselves as a playoff picture team and probably not the last team in.
I like that 8th spot for Nashville, to be honest. I'm looking at the roster, and you made some changes. You have BJ Callahan. That's going to be a net plus, but we've seen a lot of teams in the East get a lot better this offseason. So I'm looking at your 9-9-16 record and saying maybe one of those draws turns into a win, maybe 2 of those losses heads on over. Where does 9 points bring me? Right to that 7-8 split right there. I think that would be great, but I do think that the playoffs, you know, while it does matter getting hot, 4-3-10 on the road last season doesn't inspire you a lot of confidence that without a road path through the playoffs, you're going to, you know, get too far. So I think, yeah, first round of the playoff exit in that 7th, 8th spot is like the most realistic. But let's be optimistic now. What do you think the best this team could do? Because there are some unknowns. It is a new system. I'm sure you'll trade a couple of those clean sheets, you know, for a 4-goal game, maybe, you know, taking a little on the road here. So what do you think the top tier is for Nashville this year?
I think maybe 4th, 5th is your absolute limit. And I don't necessarily see it happening, but, you know, Nashville has 9 of its first 14 matches at home this year. So there's a world in which, you know, being at home helps it turn some of those losses into draws and draws into wins, and they're elevated in the table and they're in a good position as they find themselves, right, as a team under this system. And then once they found themselves, they're ready to go on the road, and they have 3 straight road games in June: Chicago Fire, New England Revolution, DC United. None of those 3 seem to be extremely scary road matches. We'll see. And you get your 9 out of 14, you get some results there, and then you just kind of tread water, right? And you're a 1.5 points per game team the rest of the way. And then you're looking at 4th or 5th place. I think we can see that. I don't think the depth is there, and I think it would require an infusion of talent in the August window, but I don't think it would be outlandish. I think anything more than 4th place, and you're starting to get into dreamland a little bit. But I think you could see a 4th or 5th place if the transfers hit, if the style clicks quickly, especially with those home games to help you out, and crucially, as you've mentioned a few times, I agree, if this team stays healthy.
Awesome. So thank you again, Wes, for joining us here today. Let us know where we can find your work.
Yeah, Club and Country is the name of the podcast. You can find us, of course, anywhere you get your podcasts, and visit the website as well that Tim runs, clubcountryusa.com.
Again, we are previewing each and every one of the 30 Major League Soccer teams. We hope you join us on this great ride. It's been nice to meet some new people, talk some soccer, and you know, I'm getting pumped for the 2025 Major League Soccer season. Can't wait for that, Wes. Thank you again for your time and for your expertise here.
Thank you guys for having me. Good to hang out.
And thank you everyone at home for checking in. This is the Designated Pundits.